Hello and welcome to Champ Select, your go-to competitive Legends of Runeterra podcast. I'm Alex, as per usual. Joining me are my two co-hosts, Noble
Hello.
and Hugh.
Hello.
And today it is the dawn or the day before the storm. We're in the eye of the hurricane here. The seasonal is this week.
Yep.
This weekend,
Saturday.
right? We're in the middle of testing as much as we possibly can. We've got a very new, exciting World Championship announcement
Hell
here
yeah.
that we want to go over to start with. And then as soon as we're done with that, we're going to go right into all things seasonal. So let's start with the World Championship announcement. This is a big deal. This is sick.
This is really cool. So I'm just kind of going to read off of the official announcement. So it starts with 64 players from each of the Americas, Europe, and Asia, as well as several ranked and seasonal tournament participants from outside of that. Will compete for seats in the World Championship finals and a $200,000 prize pool. So it sounds like there's going to be like a series of qualifier tournaments, and then the winner of that is going to get in, is what it looks like to me. 64 players from Americans compete for 6 seats, 64 from Europe for 5 seats, 64 from Asia for 5 seats, and then that looks 64 players from Asia will be combined with 64 players from the Oceania region, SEA.
Yeah, Southeast Asia.
Oh, that's right. To compete for 5 seats in the finals, which means that America has 6 of 16 and the other two each have 5. It looks like it'll be hardest to qualify from Asia and Southeast Asia because it'll be 128 players getting 5 spots instead of 64 getting 5 or 6, which is interesting.
I mean, NA is just the most competitive region as far as Runeterra goes. By a
So it
lot
would make sense if we had
more seats.
that makes sense, but like it would also make sense to me if there were like 128 of us going for 10 seats as opposed to like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it could be done in a different way.
I think they probably just looked at their user data and said, well, if 50 million players are from NA and 20 million are from the combined of Asia.
That makes sense, yeah.
You know,
might as well.
So you can come on one of 3 ways based on either seasonal tournament or ranked performances. Now, I'm going to read off some numbers, and these are the number of people that will make it into that 64 that we just talked about. 22 points. You get points from ranked. Basically, you get points from ranked in seasonal tournaments. 22 of those 64 players will be from ranked. 20 will be from seasonal tournament finalists, and 22 will be from seasonal tournament points. So the ranked points will be awarded based on your final rank at the end of each season, which is counted at the cutoff date for the seasonal tournament. So no last minute grinding.
So which is interesting that they had that dichotomy as opposed to the end of the season, because boy, does the end of the season kind of feel entirely pointless.
Yeah.
For what
absolutely.
it's worth.
Now it feels even more pointless.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter at all. I don't know. Maybe everybody needs a break, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it's more a break for them.
yeah, maybe.
Like they don't want to just
Do balance patches or like,
they get some time to like look at the seasonal tournament data, look at the ladder data, and be like, oh, okay, guys, is there any problems here? Like, what
Makes
do
sense.
you know?
So the top 22 players on each shard by the cutoff will earn a seat for the World Championship qualifiers. I just want to note real quick that all of these numbers are going to be for the first 5 Legends of Runeterra seasons. We are about to play in the 3rd seasonal.
Yeah, correct.
And so there will be 2 more seasonals after this, so 2 more ranked seasons.
Yes.
And you'll get points retroactively for the first 2. I would expect to get that we would each get a couple ladder points. I don't know exactly how it's going to work. There's going to be a leaderboard, but I expect we'll not get nothing for getting top 700 to qualify for the seasonal.
I certainly hope we get more than nothing.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And it's kind of yet to be determined how it's going to play out exactly. A player's score is determined based on their best placement in 2 out of the 5 seasons leading up to the World Championship.
Yeah, and that's a really big deal.
Yeah.
Because that means that even if you haven't played Legends of Runeterra at all, until like today, or even until like the end of this season, right? If the first day you play Legends of Runeterra is
Because there's a $200,000 prize pool.
yeah, you can still qualify for Worlds. You have to play these next 2 seasons, but that's your only disadvantage, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's a really big. It's totally doable for anyone, right? Like even player. I don't know. I'm so excited. This is so sick.
And then the top 4 players from each shard's 5 seasonal tournaments will be guaranteed a seat in the World Championship qualifiers. Any duplicates pass their seat down to a qualifier based on seasonal tournament points. And I'd imagine over 5, there's going to be a good amount of repeats. So I'd imagine the number of people who get seats from. This is another thing. Is like, say 5 of the top 10 ladder players might also qualify through seasonal tournament points, and then that means
there's going to be a big overlap.
It's going to go a ton down, right? Like it's going to go a little deeper than we might think, because if they qualify both ways, then if one person was a finalist multiple times, that seat that is reserved for them goes to a ladder person, and if that person was also a top 10 ladder person, that's another seat that goes down.
It goes to the seasonal tournament points.
Any duplicates will pass their seat to seasonal tournament points. You're right.
Correct. It doesn't go to ladder players. It goes to players who did like top 8 seasonal tournaments.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or have more combined seasonal tournament points.
Oh, I see. This makes sense.
So it's slightly different from ladder players, actually, which I thought was a really interesting
dichotomy.
Yeah, because it makes the most sense for it to just go down the ladder, but it actually doesn't. It actually places based on your seasonal ranking. So like only the top 22 players from ranked are ever going to get in. If there's duplicates, it goes down to seasonal performances.
Yeah. And I like this because like if I go, I'm not going to, but if I go start out 0-3 Saturday, I'm going to play out because 6-3 might get points.
Yeah.
Right.
But obviously you're just going to 9-0 it. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
Won't
I'll scoop in the last round to get someone else in.
No, not with points on the line. We aren't.
Oh, that's
fair.
That's fair.
We're playing for the 9-0. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So all this combined, right? Like it's a lot of numbers. Basically, let's break it down here. There's going to be qualifiers that lead into a total final world championship pool with 16 players. For whatever region you're on, you're going to be able to qualify through ladder, or you're going to be able to qualify through seasonal tournament. And that's pretty much it. There's you basically could qualify through spiking one seasonal tournament, top 4 in a seasonal tournament. You can qualify through placing highly on ladder over a couple of seasons, or you can qualify by consistently playing well in the seasonal tournaments. Yep. So basically, I think the biggest reason, or the biggest thing for this for me, is that there is now a really big reason to want to try and be like number 1 on the ladder.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, like the ladder,
which makes Nick McPlays an absolute psycho for playing when he had like 1,500 LP and like falling down like 600 LP.
Yeah.
So now he's like 6th instead of like easy first. This was after the announcement that he played too, by the way.
It's rough.
If you're watching this, I'm sorry, buddy.
Because it used to be like there used to be no real reason to try and be rank 1 outside of like clout.
Yeah,
get
people to watch your streams.
Yeah, like there's a real reason now, and a like very tangible reward. $200,000 prize pool is a lot.
Absolutely. I also think this opens up. I would not be surprised if league teams added Legends of Runeterra.
I think sponsorships. I was going to say that's a big deal too. Like this is going to bring a lot of attention into the scene.
Absolutely, that's a good amount of money on the line, especially for an online card game. It's a much more accessible and understandable pro system than Magic the Gathering, so it's got that going for it.
Yeah, it's very watchable. It's got cool animations. People who I imagine that the League of Legends World Championships or whatever are just going to be like, you're going to be able to see a bunch of people from League of Legends see the Legends of Runeterra World Championships, right? Like in the League client or whatever. They're going to click on it. It's the World Championships. It's cool. There's going to be so much exposure for this. I just think it's going to be so good. Yeah, the game is going to grow so much from having this much support from a competitive scene. And we kind of all expected this from Riot, but
it's just awesome. It's good to see.
It's so great to see it actually happen. There's been a bunch of people tweeting all day about esport organizations. It's become kind of a meme. It's been really funny, honestly, but
on the other hand, is there this much support for Valorant and TFT?
There's a good bit. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I just don't know, because I'm only really involved in Legends of Runeterra and I know about League because it's huge.
There's a lot of sponsored personalities. There's definitely Valorant teams. There's Valorant tournaments going on. TFT mostly has sponsored streamers and stuff like that. But even having a TSM, Mogwai or whatever would be a big deal for the scene, right? More, I think Evil Geniuses Swim is the only sponsored name we have in the community, really. I think so. There might be 1 or 2 others, but none that come to mind. So
cool.
All right. With that, do we have anything else we want to add on the World Championship, or is it time to get on to the important topic for now, the seasonal tournament?
I'm just excited. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. All right.
Hopefully my 3-2 from the first seasonal gets me some delicious points.
Gets you some love. Yeah. All right. So I think as far as talking about the seasonal tournament, we actually want to start this week with what is going to be our listener question of the week, because it's going to be a really good segue into, you'll see. So this week's question of the week comes from Skysong in the Discord. They ask, I've heard that a good ladder deck is not necessarily a good tournament deck, and vice versa. I understand the differentiation that good climbing decks need to be fast, and the length of games doesn't matter as much in tournaments. But can you explain a little more about what might cause a deck to be good in one format, but not the other? So, yeah, I mean, this is basically asking what makes a tournament deck good. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, and I want to start with a little comparison. Let's talk about a deck like Spiders. So Spider aggro, very good ladder deck. Right now maybe it's falling off because it's not great against Thresh Nasus and it's not great against TLC, but that's whatever. It's very powerful in ladder. You get to play a lot of quick games, and it averages out pretty well. You're going to run into a couple bad matchups, you're going to lose them, and then a lot of the times you're just going to like nut draw, high roll people, going to win close games with burn to the face, stuff like that. In a tournament setting, if your opponent looks at Spiders, a deck with a pretty exploitable weakness, like it has very bad matchups, right? It has like 26% win rate against TLC or something.
Yeah, something like that.
And if they look at that with their lineup, they can make the strategic choice that they're going to ban a different one of your decks. And then their entire plan that match is going to be around beating that Spiders deck twice because they have good matchups into it. So decks with really polarized matchups can be pretty dangerous to have in a, let's say there's a deck that's like 50-50 against the field, but that manifests in it being 70-30 against half the field and 30-70 against the rest of the field. Your opponent can look at that, and if they just happened to bring 3 of the 70% decks, they can just always beat it twice. And then you're just so unlikely to be able to win that match.
Yeah, so I think that a big factor of this is like when you look at your tournament deck, right? When you look at a ladder deck, you have to play against whatever you queue into, right? You don't get to choose. You have no choice, no conscious decision over what you're playing against whenever you queue up on ladder, right? You can target an expected meta.
Yeah, but it's still random. You're still going to play against jank.
Yeah, you're still going to play against jank, or you're going to play against random things. In a tournament, the fact that you get a ban is really a really big deal for what makes like tournament decks specifically good is that a lot of decks with like one big weakness or whatever, or like one really bad matchup, you can just ban that matchup. So that makes a deck much better, right? Like, so for example, let's take Spiders, for example. Spiders, and I'm still not going to necessarily recommend that you do this, but if you were to play Spiders in a tournament lineup, right? If your opponent has Thresh Nasus or, TLC or whatever, you can ban that bad matchup in theory. I still don't recommend you play Spiders because there's just going to be too much of both of those decks or whatever. But like, one decks with like one bad matchup or whatever that are just like specifically, or like, let's say we take TLC. TLC is probably going to be a really good tournament deck. It can just ban deep. It's like one of its only bad matchups, right?
Yeah. Which is a really bad matchup.
Yeah. And there's a lot of overlap in good ladder decks and good tournament decks, unsurprisingly. But a big difference is that you get to build them specifically knowing what you can't play against.
Yeah, and as far as the ladder side of things, what makes a good ladder deck, there's 2 important differences here to note, and that is ladder decks before Masters and ladder decks after Masters. So before Masters, really it's just a numbers game. If you take a deck and so before Masters, everything is you gain 20, you lose 20. After like plat or gold or something like that. Yeah. In like bronze and silver, you can win streak or something.
I'm not really sure, but for the most part, let's assume you win as much as you lose.
Yeah, exactly. So it's linear. Like you win one, you lose one, you're even again. So it's entirely a numbers game. So if you're looking at, we're gonna keep rolling with Spiders as our example. So you have a 60% win rate on Spiders. Let's say games take an average of 5 minutes. It's little long in my experience.
I was gonna say, that might be generous. That's a long game.
That's a really long game of Spiders, honestly.
Probably should have conceded by minute 3.
When Alex is playing a deck, the amount of time the games take increases by
it's tripled.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's say your win rate 60% on Spiders. Let's say you're at Diamond 1 0 LP. That means
you gotta win 5 games.
More than we lose.
More than we lose. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Let's see, isn't that by the numbers? You're like statistically like 100% to get into Masters if you just play 50 games. What's the?
I mean, there's never 100%. But
Yeah, there's never going to be 100%.
I mean, obviously not like
but
actually.
you're very, very likely to get into Masters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because every 10 games you play, you're going to climb 40 LP. So, statistically, you should climb like.
It should take you like 25 games.
Yes, whatever.
And if you play 50, I would be shocked if you didn't get there. Like, if you have a 60% win rate, you are locked to get in after 25 games because
If you had a 65% win
yeah,
rate.
exactly.
the whole
That's
time.
my point. That's that. So pre-Masters, it's just a numbers game. You can look at your win rate. If your win rate is steady, if you've had the same win rate for a while and it hasn't been like I started at like an 87, then it's gradually decreased as I've gone higher and higher, then the math gets a little funky because you may be losing more and more as you get higher and higher. But if you just look at your win rate and look at how many games you need, you can just say, okay, if I just put my head down and play 30 games or 50 games or 40 games, I will be in Masters, period, by the numbers.
Keep playing how I'm playing,
And
playing the same deck.
Exactly. And so just
Nothing
stay
changes.
consistent and do that and you'll get there. It's probably going to suck a lot because I personally,
You've been going through the slog, the spider slog.
I just hate playing the same deck forever and ever and ever and ever.
Try some TLC, boy.
With it, dear God, I would
the
rather
LP is so free.
I would rather just crawl into the deepest recesses of hell.
The tech is sick.
I hate
You hate it.
I hate TLC. I've
Why?
tried it's so boring. It's so boring. It's so
I just
slow.
like
you gotta-
cackling when I topic
got-
the fading memories and they die.
You got to try enjoying hitting the pass button. That's the secret.
Oh, I love hitting the pass button.
Hit that pass.
I play a lot of Zoe Lee. It's my favorite deck ever, and it's just like I despise TLC with just a.
It's kind of be wrong.
Anyway, back on topic.
Yeah.
The good ladder decks, you can play them. It's pretty important that they're fast because time to LP ratio is a very real thing. But like once you hit into Masters, and this also tends to be true in tournament, you just want the highest possible win rate.
Yeah,
Like it does not matter how fast you win your tournament match. The only thing that matters is whether or not you won. If it takes you 50 minutes and you have a
as long as you don't
61% win
time
rate,
out.
yeah, like in theory, if you're going to take 50 minutes and have a 52% win rate, or take 5 minutes and have a 50% win rate, like you should take 50 minutes and have the 52% win rate or whatever, right? Like,
Absolutely.
and that is not at all true on ladder.
Yeah.
At least if your sole intention is to climb as fast as you can, which presumably it is.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the difference. And there's, like there's some things that, like I said, you just can't go near ladder with because if you just queue into like Teemo Burn, like you just queue into TLC, you just lose. Like you just don't want to go on ladder with that. Like
yeah, exactly. And after Masters, it becomes a little funky because you
You need above a
lose.
60% win rate.
Exactly.
Like, I went 3-2 and lost 2 LP.
Yeah, exactly.
And
You
so
can't- you can't just sit there and be like, I have above a 50% win rate, so if I just play 2,000 games, I'll climb. That's literally not how it works.
So if you play 100 games going 3-2 every time, you've won like you've won like 20 more games than you've lost,
and you'll be at 0 LP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's brutal.
It is brutal. It is absolutely brutal. You kind of have to just like play for a while, and you just kind of have to win streak a little bit at certain points.
Got to
You
be
get, like-
good. There are people with thousands of with 1,000 ladder points in Masters. Like you
Oh,
just got to
yeah.
have like
Crush
a
it.
nutty win rate
Yeah, it's hard.
and play a lot. You both have to have an insane win rate and play a lot. Masters is hard.
As it should be, but like, man, it feels bad sometimes.
So I think that differentiation is very interesting. And now we should go into like what we actually think we should be playing for the seasonal tournament. So we talked about the like, basically I'm trying to segue into here. What are the best tournament decks right now? I think that most people have kind of settled on Thresh Nasus being one of the most consistent tournament decks right now. I've been hearing it a lot. Noble's raising his hand. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say I played a tournament this last weekend, so I wanted to talk a little bit about my
yeah, that's a great
experience.
idea.
So I played the Mastering Runeterra tournament. It was like a $1,000 in prizes. It was like a $2 entry in for their it's like if you're in your Patreon, you got invited. Really cool. Fun tournament, well run.
Yeah, it was
great. I really loved the playing the LOR, the Runeterra ban. That thing is just great.
Oh,
I wish
Runeterra
we were
ban?
able to use it for the seasonal because you can like if I have 2 monitors, so I just like had the Runeterra band up, so I could just like click on the deck list whenever I want. Like I didn't have to have taken pictures. I didn't have to write them down.
Yeah,
I
you
could
didn't
just
have to
look
try to
at all
remember
times.
it,
Yeah, it was
yeah.
just great.
Regardless, how did the tournament
It was
go?
good. I ended up 5-3. I lost my win and in, I think 6-2, but
Yeah, you
to
lost your
6-2.
win in.
But I don't think the person that beat me got in.
Oh,
But I might have had better tiebreakers than them. Who
whatever.
knows? But maybe they did. I just didn't see their name, but I could have just messed it up and seen the wrong thing. It was pretty good. I was very happy with my lineup. I played TLC, Lee Zoe, and
Deep.
Deep. Yeah. And then the lineup that won the tournament was only one deck different line. It was Thresh, Nasus instead of Deep. And that's what Closing Time, a friend of ours and a person in our Discord, testing partner, played. And so we were definitely pretty happy with the Lee Zoe TLC part of the lineup. I'm kind of looking for that flex third deck potentially.
And Thresh Nasus is like really climbing as like a real standout.
Thresh
tournament
Nasus
deck
has
choice.
rocketed to the top of a lot of people's tier lists for sure.
Yeah, which I mean, do you want to? You've played the deck. I've played the deck a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you have any like? What's your guys' best guess as to why Thresh Nasus is like becoming sort of this like quote unquote like tournament all star?
You might not think it looking at the list, because looking at this list, this is not what I would bet. But the deck just dumpsters aggro in the same way that TLC dumpsters aggro. So you just honestly, I'm going to give you some free advice. You just can't play aggro decks on ladder right now. Everyone's playing Thresh Nasus, everyone's playing TLC, and the win rates are like 65%. Like it's really, really brutal. And you have to bring up lineups that like specifically target it. So I played against a lot of lineups. Oh God, I wish I took better notes. I know that I lost in the last round to a lineup that had a Ash Nox deck, I think, that I had to ban.
It was like discard aggro, TF Fizz.
Oh, I lost to discard aggro, TF Fizz, Ash Nox. Oh, Sand Scouts.
Sand Scouts.
Sand Scouts. And I had to ban Sand Scouts because my lineup is not very good against that deck. That deck is really interesting as a board-centric aggro deck because the Azir and the Emperor's Podium are really hard to kill, but the attacks stay really good when they're out. Like they're not dying to Avalanche, but then only one unit attacking can hit you for like 8 or whatever.
Yeah, it's really good.
Which is just very good against Avalanches. And then I lost to discard aggro. Close, very, very close game. And then I just got ridiculously high rolled by TF Fizz. Like I was talking to the guy in the chat and he's like, that is the best I've ever drawn. He like flipped.
It was crazy.
He like flipped Twisted Fate on turn 3 or turn 5 and then killed me. Like then it was a better draw than a lot of the pre-ban TF Fizz draws I've seen.
Like I think it was Twisted Fate blue card, and then like triple rummage discarding a stress testing.
No, it was pick a card and then
and
rummage,
then double rummage discarding a stress testing, and then like 3 Burble Fish all in the same turn. It was sick.
Yeah, I just got
Deck's not dead, but
yeah, and he had like get excited at a point, like a bunch of stuff against TLC, and he just got there.
regardless,
This is fine.
Thresh
it's all good.
Nasus.
Yeah,
Right. This deck is just kind of, it just dumpsters aggro. It
does everything.
it's hard to attack it. I
mean,
think.
so it has insane
Incredibly
early game
explode.
and insane late game. Like it'll absolutely murder you on like turn 2 or 3. It can attack you for 5 on turn 1. It can attack you for like 15 on turn 3 with like a really
yeah. I
good
played a set
blighted
against Nico,
caretaker.
and every game he had the attack token, and Dunekeeper Ravenous butchered me.
Oh,
I won one of them because I got like Ash into Reckoning, and he only won because he misplayed. So, but
Yeah.
like it's just
those games are so hard to
Yeah.
win. Whenever they have the explosive early game draws, you feel so behind,
reasonably frequent.
which is quite often. Yeah.
Blighted Caretaker is responsible for a lot amount of massive blowouts.
Oh yeah. That card is messed up.
Yeah, that card's messed up. You get Bakai Sand Spinner. That card goes through Spell Shield and is messed up. The vulnerable stays forever.
It is.
Like I got my Lee Sin vulnerable and just had to like do a ton of work to protect it, like 4 turns in a row, and then I just like couldn't win from there, like stuff like that.
Yeah. And then normally a deck like this, you're going to like, okay, I just have to survive, like you're going to eventually you'll like hit a really good box or a couple avalanches, like an ice shard, and you're like, his board is clear. I've stabilized at like 5 or 6 or something, and I'm fine. And that's just true for a lot of aggro decks, but that's just not even remotely true for this deck because along comes the 12 power Nasus, and then you just sitting there like, I hope he doesn't have Atrocity.
You get
I feel
Susan.
like every single game against Thresh Nasus ends in I hope they don't have Atrocity.
Every single
and then you win about half of them.
But then a good amount of the time you
when
lose
they either
anyway
have it
because
or don't.
And then a good amount of the time they lose anyway because it's like flipped, and then they manage to pull your they Bakai Sand Spinner your big creature, and then they can pull it, and then they just hit you in the face with Nasus.
Yeah.
Like that happens a lot too.
Yeah, and I think that
And
one of the
Thresh
big
gets them
reasons
out.
this deck, we're just kind of talking about every part of the deck because every single
There isn't
matchup
a bad
has-
turn.
Yeah, every single matchup has something out of this deck that they're really afraid of. Like if you're playing TLC, you really don't want to see the Thresh draws. Like Thresh is a really hard card for you to beat. If you're playing aggro, you don't want to see Blighted Caretaker or Cursed Keeper, Ravenous Butcher, Dune Keeper, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're playing control, you don't want to see too many Nasus,
and
right?
Rite of
Like-
Negation, really.
Yeah,
important.
Rite of Negation, right? There's just pieces of this deck that happen to all seamlessly work together, and every single deck feels like it has bits that it's good against and bits that it's not, which makes it such a good tournament deck.
Also,
I think.
Normally, every deck it's a little bit true for this deck, but much less so for other decks. Every deck normally has a point in the game, like some amount of turns. Let's say it's 3 through 5. It's like, okay, well, certain decks have a pretty weak turns 3 through 5. Like they don't have many 3, 4,
Or
or
late
5 drops.
game or early
Or yeah, exactly. There's early, mid, or late, and you can it usually has a distinctly weaker one of those things than the other two. This is way less true of this deck. It has an incredibly explosive early game potential, very solid mid game potential. You just on turn 4 they just play
Thresh is
Spirit
a
Leash.
house.
Yeah, Thresh is
Thresh
insane.
is so good in this deck, I swear.
Yeah, we've been waiting a long time for that card. People put him in control. He was decent or whatever. This is a nutty Thresh.
The games where your opponent has a reasonable early game and then plays Thresh on turn 5 just feels so unwinnable so often.
Yeah, he just flips in a turn and a half.
I lost a game on TLC against this deck in which the first damage I took was on turn 5 when he played a Cursed Keeper and attacked me for 1. And I lost 4 turns later.
Brutal.
I don't know what happened, man. Okay, I do know what happened. I just didn't draw my combo. I kept a card that was good at beating
Still,
the fast
though,
start,
you
and I
know?
just didn't do the fast start.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem.
Yeah, you can die at every point in the game, and then you'll die.
I eventually died to 2 Nasuses.
Yeah, you'll it has the early game, and it has the inevitability of most control decks.
And very importantly, it's very interactive. It has a lot of challenger units. The Bakai Scan Spinner, huge. Playing Vile Feast, playing Black Sphere, playing Blighted
box.
Caretaker. And Thresh is the box. Or actual the
no,
box.
it also plays the box.
I've never seen the box on a list, but I
Really?
yeah. But I'm that's another thing about this deck. There's 10 ways to build it. Even in the Cosmic Makes Plays data, he was there were 2 different Thresh Nasus decks, and I read the article, and I'm still not quite sure exactly what the difference was. But there's so many different ways to build it. Are you playing Rite of Negation? Are you playing Rite of Calling? Are you there's just a lot of options, and there's a lot of ways you can build it. A lot of things you have to play around, and it's just the deck's just very powerful. And I think this has quickly climbed. This and TLC are the decks that stand out as something that you need to have a plan for. You come into this tournament and you don't have a plan for discard aggro, I think that might be ill-advised, but I think you'll be fine. But if you don't have a plan for Thresh Nasus and you don't have a plan for TLC, yeah,
it's a problem. And I think one more factor. So that Mastering Runeterra tournament, there was a stats sheet that somebody posted on Twitter. I'm sorry, I cannot remember who it was that posted it. I will try to find it and put a link to this tweet in the description of the video. But basically, he analyzed what decks have a common trend to show up alongside one another. And the most common deck pairing out of anything was that 15% of players brought both Thresh Nasus and TLC to that tournament.
That
what
seems
percentage
right.
of players?
15%
Yeah,
of players brought both of those decks.
and so did the winner.
yeah. And that was the highest correlation out of any deck combination was 15%. And so you need to expect to be playing against both TLC and Thresh Nasus in the same round a lot.
Yeah.
They fit together really nicely. And like,
They have similar strengths.
spoiler
similar
alert,
weaknesses.
this is probably what we're going to recommend playing as well.
Yes.
Right. So
level 1 for me is starting with those 2 decks.
yeah, so if you don't have a plan, level 1 I think is play these decks. And if you do have a plan, you need to make sure your plan is good against the like this is the thing you need to be looking out for, I think.
And something I want to
season.
highlight right now is a lot of people have decks that they show me and they think they're good against TLC. They think they're good against Thresh Nash, just like these overwhelm decks and stuff. I'm not going to say it's not true, but you can only be so good against them. I really do think trying to find a triple aggro lineup that beats these 2 decks is a little bit of a fool's errand. And I'm not planning on doing it. I've thought about it. I tried it. I put in the chat the other day, what if we just banned TLC and played triple low to the ground aggro? That could be really good. And then I looked at the Thresh Nasus data numbers and I was like, okay, if people are playing these decks together, 15% of them, or maybe even more at this tournament.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I expect that number to go up in this seasonal tournament. Like, I think that, Thresh Nasus was kind of like, at least for me, it was on the rise. This tournament happened last weekend, the one that you played in, the Mastering Runeterra tournament, and it like really exploded. Like the numbers were really good for it all tournament. I expect there to be, it's been on the ladder all week. People are going to play it in the seasonal.
I think that this is going to be the least diverse tournament meta we've seen by a lot.
Yet,
The last one had a lot of TF and Aphelios.
Great.
I think it might have had a higher TF Aphelios correlation than, like, I think that the
Interesting.
TF Aphelios correlation,
There was
that,
so much,
if we
yeah.
looked at those numbers, would have been like 60%.
Right, but I think what I mean by this is that realistically speaking, like I think I can just I've never at no point in any tournament I've looked at or played in for this game until this season have I thought, I can probably just think about 4, maybe 5 decks and ignore the rest and I should be fine. Yeah. I've never thought that. I've never come close to thinking that.
That's
do
fair.
you think that this time?
Oh yeah.
Another thing about what I just said is I just said the correlation of 2 champions, and this is the correlation of 2 decks, which are very different.
Yeah.
Right? Because like there, you were playing TF Aphelios together. We were playing like Aphelios Fiora, TF Fizz, other people playing like TF Aphelios.
There was that Aphelios Tom
Raka
Kench deck. Yeah.
Tom Kench. Sorry, not Tom Raka. Raka is the other.
Raka no,
Raka's
Raka
the bad
no,
half,
not
yeah.
allowed. Yeah. So if we're playing TLC and Thresh Nasus, right, or if we're expecting a lot of it, that kind of brings like the third deck into question. I think that's where a lot of people are kind of struggling, and a lot of people have either Thresh Nasus or TLC, or their plan is to ban TLC. Planning to ban TLC team seems like a totally fine plan to me.
I wouldn't say that if I wasn't. So I played this tournament this weekend that I just talked about, which means I played a lot of TLC mirrors, and I think that I'm very comfortable in TLC mirrors. And by the end of the weekend, I was consistently outplaying my opponents. I think that I was punting relentlessly earlier in the tournament. I do think my first 2 losses were easily avoidable, and I just needed to be paying more attention. I hadn't gotten a lot of sleep.
The early morning rounds, yeah, you got to wake up, eat breakfast, get your coffee.
Yeah.
So what are your guys' front runners for like, what do you think the other notable decks are that people need to be looking out for this seasonal tournament? I mean, we could start with, go Hugh.
I just think that, well, first of all, my lineup ideally is Zoe Elite, TLC, and Thresh Nasus.
Yeah, I think Zoe Elite
I don't
is
think
the
there's any
deck at the
role
top
that
of that.
even comes close to changing.
Really?
Like,
Not even close to changing?
No, I don't. No, absolutely not. Like, partially because Zoe Elite I just feel so comfortable on.
Yeah.
It's also one of the few decks that can actually, like, it actually has a reasonable plan into TLC, and it has a reasonable plan into Thresh Nasus.
I actually think that, so I was going to say Zoe Lee is the deck that stands out the most to me. I actually think it might be the only, not the only, but I think it is the best deck that has a good Thresh Nasus matchup and a good TLC matchup.
And good doesn't mean we're not crushing it.
No, I think that
53
I think that we're
or
quite favored against TLC, but I think like Thresh Nasus Lee Zoe, that one's probably like 55% Lee Zoe at the most, right? Probably more realistically like 53, 52%, something like that. But that's pretty good. Like
that's solid.
And
I'm thrilled about that.
yeah, so like and it's Lee Zoe, which is nice. There's just a lot of decks that kind of just get hammered by it. Right. But putting Lee Zoe in a lineup is risky because a lot of the time you're going to end up against these random, and a big part of the reason why I'm more comfortable playing it is because we just talked about how it's going to be hard to justify bringing these triple aggro lineups, right? And those are the lineups that you really just want to avoid if you put Lee Zoe in your lineup. You can win these aggro matchups, but they're not easy. And if your opponent bans not Lee Zoe, you're gonna have to win, right? Like,
do y'all want to hear the numbers from the Cosmic Fizz deck?
I definitely want to hear the numbers.
So, Lee Zoe was the most played deck that didn't have a positive win rate. Everyone else had 53 above. It was 49.
Yep.
That seems right.
This data thinks it's 48% against Thresh Nasus. And I just want to say, this is not gospel. I actually think a lot of these numbers are wrong, but this is the starting point.
Yeah, this was the data.
Yeah. 47% against Spiders, 43% against Ash LeBlanc, 46% against, it says Teemo Draven, but I'm like really sure that it's discard aggro.
Yeah, probably.
36% against Nightfall. Yikes. 50%, like exactly 50% against TLC, which is weird. 50% against Ez Draven, and then 38% against Shen Jarvan, and then just even against the Mirror. So none of them were good.
This is actually a really interesting. I saw a poll on Twitter today, and it was a poll that was like, a deck has below a 50% win rate, but a lot of top players are telling you that it's like one of the best decks in the format. Like, how good do you think the deck is, basically? And then it was like in parentheses, yes, this is about Lee Zoe.
Yeah,
you know, it's like, because it is interesting because this deck has had this phenomenon, right? This is not the first time that Lee Zoe has consistently had bad numbers.
This is the
before.
Lee Zoe experience.
This is the Lee Zoe experience. Yeah. I'm beginning to feel part of the Lee Zoe cult. Like, I'm spreading this Lee Zoe, propaganda here. Like, play the 49% win rate deck. It's good, I swear. But it keeps having 49%
thing is having a deck
rates.
without bad matchups. Okay, this deck has a 49% win rate, and I want you to play.
And it's all bad matchups.
Yeah. This is just, I think this is going to be true forever.
I think I agree.
So not only is Lee Zoe really hard, it's really hard into these specific decks. I'm winning games against TLC with Tricksters, and it took me 3 or 4 games to figure that out, that was the way I was going to win the game. Yeah. So I'm just going to invoke some Tricksters and kill them with them. Like, that's the plan.
I win more games with the Trickster than I win with Lee Sin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that a true fact?
It might not be true,
but it's at least close.
But I absolutely think it is true. And
wow, that's insane.
Like, yeah, actually, like, because people are
the
so
Trickster
afraid.
slaps.
The Trickster is insane.
That otter bops people.
The TLC matchup is really hard. There's a lot going on. You need to know when you should invoke the Trickster, and you need to know when you should invoke Equinox so you don't die to the Watcher. But you need like 3 of them, so you need to invoke like the first 2, and then hopefully like draw a Hush, and then like invoke threats. But like maybe you should have invoked the threats first because you need to start pressuring them with them.
There's a really interesting like balancing act where like your like removal spells are in combat and their removal spells are out of combat too, and you're both kind of trying to set up these combo turns.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of turns where you just like have to not attack with your Lee for like, what would be not quite lethal damage, because then they can play their Lysandra and then combo kill you on their turn. So you just have to wait 2 turns or whatever, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
That matchup is so hard.
All of it's, that's the thing. There's no such thing as like an easy matchup for the deck, because the deck is so inherently difficult. Like, even the matchups where you're like, I can't lose this matchup, you can lose the matchup.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, you can punt the.
I rewatched a game I played against Nico's Thresh Nasus today, and like there were just 4 different turns that I played badly that if I played any of them better, I think I would have won. But like, and then at the very end, he was like, "Lol, you punted," and I was like, "Yep," but I top decked Hush, stun your guy, and killing on the next turn with Lee, and then he top decked Atrocity because he like messed up. It was good, but just like we analyzed that game, and I was like, okay, I shouldn't have no-posied this Black Spear on this Trickster. Okay, I shouldn't have played this. I should have chumped with this Mentor of the Stones because I can get the 2 power from the gems instead. Then I don't have to play my Lee Champ spell to get 2
so
spells.
That you can have an extra.
And then like, yeah, it's just like all, and then I can play those to like make a guy a 3+ power to block a Nasus, like just like all of that kind of stuff.
There's a lot.
Oh yeah, a bunch of, so something that's like wildly counterintuitive is that you actually don't want to kill the Mentor, because the Mentor dead gives 3 power and the Mentor alive only gives 2.
Yeah.
And if he stays alive for 2 attacks, you're probably losing the game always. But like,
you do need to kill Mantor of the Stones. Don't get that
Eventually,
wrong.
like-
but like,
Get it twisted.
don't
You gotta kill it.
there's a crucial point in the game where like if there's just a Lee Sin in play and he just like plays a Mentor and he hasn't played any spells yet,
a lot of the time you just don't want to kill
just
the
don't,
Mentor.
just don't kill the Mentor. Then Lee Sin, it's so hard to give Lee Sin his 2 spell triggers. It's way harder than you think it is to give Lee Sin his 2 spell triggers. Like and then giving them to him for free is really nice from the side of the Lee Zoe player.
Then another thing is like your Dragonlings are actively bad because they're Thresh triggers, and if they like trade them with 1/1s, they're like Slay triggers.
Thresh is the
And
best card in the TLC or in the Thresh Nasus Lee Zoe mirror or matchup, not mirror.
Also one of the best cards in the mirror and the best card against TLC. Spoiler alert, it's like the best card in the deck.
Thresh is really good. Yeah,
Nasus is the most important card in the deck, and I think Thresh is more powerful.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
He just puts you in such awkward spots.
there's Lee Zoe, and then I think I want to talk about the other deck that you played this weekend, and that's Deep. So where are we at on Deep? I've got a couple interesting opinions on Deep, but I'm curious what you guys think.
I am wildly off Deep.
Wildly off.
Just it just gets absolutely crushed by Thresh Nasus. Like you can't
Yeah, so that's enough. That's
you
so
can't bring a deck that gets like
you're like actually pretty good at beating the aggro part, but you just cannot answer Nasus,
Thresh
yeah.
into Nasus. Like you can't.
Yeah, or Thresh. Thresh
You
is a
can't
huge
answer
problem,
Thresh
too.
or Nasus. Yeah.
Exactly, because Thresh is a 3/6 by default before he levels up, and you need to be Deep, have a Devourer, and have them not interact with your Devourer.
Feast, yeah.
Yeah, if he just Vile Feast you, that's okay. You lost.
That card, by the way, Thresh Nasus got way better when they started putting Vile Feast in their deck. Fun fact.
I didn't know they ever didn't have it in their deck.
I
I believe that was absolutely a thing. Like this deck has been evolving.
It's a weird amalgamation of a deck too.
Well, and
right?
also like this deck has existed. Like people were playing Nasus Kindred for a while, but like once they decided Thresh was good, that was like a month ago.
Yeah.
And
No.
it has not been the best deck until now.
it took that long for people to realize it,
Or to find the
people
good
to
list,
optimize
to
it.
find
Yeah.
optimize it, because there's just so
It was a
many ways to build
combination,
it.
I think.
Like,
I
putting
think
Bakai Sandspinner in there, it's a huge up. It doesn't like do the sacrifice thing, but it's nuts.
Yeah, they had to find a nice, elegant balance, like really walk the line between having these powerful synergies and not playing all the bad cards.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of the same dance that TF Fizz walked, I think, where like
Yeah.
it was like good for a while, and then eventually people took out all the bad cards and put in good cards instead, and then it was the best deck.
that's usually the thing that happens with decks like this that constantly evolve is that at the start everyone's leaning a little hard into the gimmick, and then they suddenly realize that like, okay,
When somebody comes along and takes the combo out.
yeah,
and the
or
deck's
like
better.
they start realizing that there's like 5 of these cards that are gimmick cards that are, when they're at their best, they're still only slightly better than these other cards that are always good.
Yeah.
It happened in Magic recently where the best deck got 2 cards banned out of it, which were the combo cards, and then they didn't have the combo anymore, and the deck was just better. Like that happens often in Magic, and it happens here too with nerfs, where you realize that your deck was doing really powerful stuff that weren't the combo, and it's like maybe just better if you take it out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Turns out having a really good fair plan is often better than having an unfair plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Regardless, so the thing that about Deep though that is intriguing is it's pretty much the only deck that has like a really good TLC matchup. And so that alone almost makes it like a defensible tournament lineup choice, I think.
Yeah. Which is weird because you also like the matchup's also hard. So you
It,
need to know how to
yeah,
play it.
I mean, there's no easy matchups.
You know what my take
anymore,
on
I don't
Deep
think.
is that there are 5 ways to build the deck. One of them's busted, 2 of them suck, and 2 of them are fine. And I do not have time to figure out which one.
Yeah, that's honestly my take on Deep.
Like I would need to
too.
play like 10 games with them, and it would still be anecdotal. And then at that point, like
If there's a Deep pro out there that knows the answer, then like I'm here for it.
yeah, like I think if you just like are very confident with a Deep list, know its matchups, and like think that you have it well positioned and tuned for the meta, like you should probably play it. But I don't know if I'm gonna get
Are they
there.
playing Lost Riches? Are they playing Stalking Shadows? Are you playing Fading Memories? Are you playing Slaughter Dogs? Like how many Withering Wail? Any copies of Vengeance? Like
Yes.
are you playing? I've seen decks that just don't have any Maokais in them.
Don't play Slaughter Docs.
Don't play Slaughter Dogs.
Don't play Slaughter Dogs is my advice as well. It's a little too slow.
Maokai feels similarly.
Maokai feels pretty bad as well.
I go back and forth on that. Like, and that's the thing. Like, I don't think there's anyone that knows for sure.
Yeah.
And there's definitely people who have a much better understanding than we do. I'm not an expert, honestly. Like, I love this deck and I played a lot of it. And like Noble said, there's like a bunch of different versions, and I'm still not sure which is the best one.
Yeah.
Like, I took out Slaughter Docs, I took out Lost Riches. It's felt better. I've tried the no Maokai version. I've tried the version with Maokai. I've tried like the 3 of like Lure of the Depths is a card that I hadn't played forever, and then I started playing it. I was like,
Expedition All-Star Lure of the Depths. Yeah,
It's
I saw that
insane,
one
like-
in a list, and it's insane.
yeah, your Sea Scarabs are 1 mana,
Or 0.
or
The
yeah,
second Lure of the Depths is so much better than the first one.
yeah, and like
It's crazy. Yeah.
and suddenly I'm happy to be playing Abyssal Eye, which wasn't true for the longest
Yeah, which has
time.
never been true. Yeah.
Like the deck is just morphing, and I don't have time to.
it feels like it's
We're
in
too
the
close
process.
we're too close to the finish line to be like messing around with like what's the optimal deep list when I'm pretty sure I don't want to play the deck.
I think people are going to find it for next season, and it's going to be hype. I hope, at least. I think it might get the TF Fizz and the Thresh Nasus treatment, where it like it's so close to being in the limelight. As soon as one person finds the busted list and goes 10-0 with it on stream, like it's going to be everywhere.
Yeah, I mean
I think
Thresh
that's really
Nasus
close.
is gonna eat a fat nerf, but
Yeah, it
I think
might.
that's
It's
reasonable. So another thing that's good against Thresh Nasus is there's a lot of like, I played against Zoe Diana, and it felt like I could never win. And that was just because of a specific game where I didn't put on a lot of early pressure, but like they had so many silence effects
That
from
does sound bad,
Nasuses,
yeah.
and like, and then maybe if that deck is also good against TLC, like maybe that's a good choice, like one of those big invoke decks.
is that the like Swarm deck?
No, it's mono Targon except for 3 atrocities. And
just
the,
goes big.
the big problem was
Yeah.
that my deck, he had a hush so that he beat my atrocity, and my deck absolutely could not beat the Great Beyond. He didn't even need to atrocity. He
Yeah,
just hit me in the face. with
sorry,
twice.
that's actually the exact deck I was talking about. I just call it a Swarm deck because there was a version with Aphelios as well, and basically its plan was to kind of just like play the 3/1 that gives 2 spell mana, play
Oh,
Zoe's
yeah, yeah.
spell off of that,
Oh, that
play a
deck was
free
sick.
creature, play the Starry
Scamp?
Scamper, and then like basically that deck could vomit out like 10 power on turn 2 for like because they just made all this mana off of Veiled Temple and all
Yeah.
this other stuff, and
Yeah,
that-
but now it's more of a like, it's basically Zoe A Soul, but like instead of playing A Soul, we're playing Diana, and then we're playing like, what's the one? The 4 mana Mountain Scryer.
Yeah, Mountain
yeah,
Scryer.
it just plays
thing
a
that
billion
invokes.
Celestials, and then all of a sudden their Devourer has or Destroyer has 20 power, and you're like,
you just get
oh,
Atrocity'd.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
and
get
you
Atrocity.
Atrocity, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's the deck I was talking.
Yeah, that deck is pretty good. There's a lot of like decks that I think are like close enough that I could reasonably try them, but I don't think there's that many. Like I said, like I think Hugh said, like I don't think we don't have that much time. The last deck that I think honestly I would even consider is this Ash Noxus Marauders deck. And I don't think it's very good, to be
No,
honest.
LeBlanc
I want
Sivir?
to. I mostly. Well, I do think I might play a cool LeBlanc Sivir like Overwhelm list, but I need more testing on that, so I'm not going to say anything definitive on that one quite yet. But I think it is quite good, and I need to play the TLC matchup more to be confident. But I do suspect it has a good Thresh Nasus matchup. Regardless, this Ash Marauders deck seems popular lately, and I think it's bad.
Yeah, it's my take for most overhyped deck right now.
Yeah,
Which someone on my stream said today, so I'm not going to claim. Which Armit said in my stream today. So.
I just don't. That deck, like, it has some really disgusting draws where when it plays like Marauder on 3, Marauder on 4, it can feel pretty busted sometimes.
Yeah.
But only sometimes. Like, sometimes the Marauders just die on turn 3.
The thing about that deck I've found is that I can never feel like I'm gonna. I always feel like, oh god, I lose, and then I just end up winning because the Marauders don't have trample or overwhelm, and you just get to chump them for a long time.
Yeah, for so long.
And I want to. This was one of the closest game I've played ever. I was playing as Deep into this deck once, and I literally finally won the game by hitting him for lethal on the turn before I was going to deck. Like
Oh my-
actually,
wow.
like legitimately deck.
You were
Not-
just gonna draw your whole deck.
no, I was at 0 cards already.
Oh my god.
You didn't have a champ spell.
I don't remember why I didn't have a champ spell, but I did not have a champ spell. Like I was
Weird.
dead 100%. And this entire game I had been blocking 7/7s into his 13 14s or whatever.
It's
like
ridiculous. So like once you get behind against this deck, when they're attacking you with 2 that get +2/+2, you can just never trade.
You don't catch up. Yeah.
And that's kind of why it feels so like gross to play against. Is like you're like, damn, like I can't ever beat this like 10 power Marauder.
This deck feels really bad to play against, and I think that's a big reason why it has so much hype, because you only need to lose to this deck. You only need to get annihilated by Elixir of Iron and Troll Chant and like
On their
double Marauder.
and then strengthen
Yeah,
numbers,
like one time to feel how crushingly hopeless it is trying to play like a board centric deck when they're attacking you with these 7 power creatures on turn 5 that grow every time, and you're like, I can never ever win. Or like looking at an Avalanche and you're like, just never gonna happen.
On
Like,
the other
I'll
hand,
never
I
get
like
there.
played a strength number against Thresh Nasus, whacked, and then he like traded with one with a sand spinner, speared the other, and then I was just like, never
See,
gonna win.
that's kind of the reality of this deck. I was gonna say is it's easy to forget those games where you try to do the thing and it just doesn't work at all, or you just
It's
like
kinda
only draw one
Fearsomes, where,
Marauder.
like, if there are 2, if there's 1 and you don't have a 3 power one, or there's 2 and you don't have a single 4 power creature, it's really, really rough.
It's useless.
But if
yeah.
you do, it's like usually fine.
yeah, exactly.
yeah, this is one of those decks that feels like a prime candidate for just play it and feel how not busted it is.
Yeah,
You'll
absolutely.
find out pretty quick. It's not actually busted. And,
One thing sorry, continue.
I was just gonna say that like I don't think it's as bad as you two are saying it is, but I don't think it's nearly as good as people are saying it is right now.
Like I don't think it's terrible or anything. Like it also usually has the Reckoning, which can like blow out like Thresh Nasus or something.
Yeah, you can get some blowouts with the Reckoning. The Reckoning is messed up.
Yeah, so you can have some like really good matchups against Thresh Nasus. I don't know exactly what the numbers are. I guess I could look at this Cosmic thing real quick. TLC definitely feels rough. If you get to a point where they can't Avalanche your Marauders when you strengthen numbers, it's very hard for them to remove them.
Yeah, that matchup feels like a race, to be honest, because like TLC can't reasonably remove all of their creatures throughout the course of the game. So you really do just kind of have to try and line up a couple key pieces of removal and then just like combo kill them as fast as you possibly can. That's usually how that matchup plays out.
Yeah, but then the Lee Zoe feels really rough against the deck because they have so many Frostbites. So I kind of had to ban it on site because I didn't know a lot about it, and I knew I wasn't good against Lee Zoe, and I knew that TLC or Thresh Nasus, whichever they wanted to play against less, was going to get banned. So I was like, just kind of had to ban it on site in the tournament.
That's really interesting. I've always felt totally fine playing into that deck as Lee Zoe.
They just have Frostbites and a clock. Like it's kind of rough.
It's pretty, the new variants of the deck I think are pretty hard.
I don't
Yeah.
know why Lee Zoe. None of the cards changed, but it just feels so much worse than it used to.
I mean, it's a different meta. Yeah. I mean,
I guess
basically
Hush and
like,
Pale Cascade both changed.
a
since when I
combination of,
remember it being,
like,
the best.
a bunch of early aggressive creatures backed up with some frostbite stuff. Like it and the creatures are big too, so it's not like these dragonlings like really deal with them all that well a lot of the time.
You know what's insane against this deck? File Feast was really good. Like every turn, this is the turns where Nico's attacking me on 5 on turn 1 every game. But then I would play my Iceveil Archer or Vorsen Sentry, and then I would get Vile Feasted, and then I'd get open for 7 or whatever, 6 or 7. And those were like, damn. So like the early creatures have 1 toughness, and so like something like Vile Feast, you don't want like Avalanche because it's gonna kill like a 3/1 and put 2 damage on a 5/5.
But Vile
like,
Feast is messed up.
Agreed.
And the spiders chump these huge marauders.
Yeah,
which is
it
all
was
great too.
really good. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that deck is maybe is not the best, but I could see it doing well this seasonal tournament. Like I wouldn't be shocked. I suspect that it won't do that well, but I wouldn't be all that surprised if it ended up being really good or whatever.
Yeah, it looks slightly unfavored versus Thresh Nasus. Ahead versus Spiders. Ahead versus Discard Aggro. That's a good sign.
So it's beating all the aggro decks. I totally believe that. It seems so hard to ever catch up against like a strength in numbers or just Marauder.
yeah, it's behind Nightfall Aggro. It's losing to Spiders. Sorry, I was reading it.
Oh, you were reading wrong. All right, never mind. I
Loses
take
to
it back.
Thresh Nasus. It loses to Discard Aggro, and which does make sense as well.
Yeah.
Spiders.
I could easily see the other side of that argument.
But it's beating Nightfall
Oh, it's apparently 40% against TLC. Get this shit out of here. No, thank you. That's the whole plan. See, this is what I'm saying. People are like, I have this aggro deck that beats TLC, and then it doesn't. It just doesn't.
They never do. That's the thing. See, everybody has an aggro deck that beats TLC because everybody's aggro deck can get most of the way there, and then nobody can beat Flipped Lysandra.
Yeah.
It's I don't know how you're supposed to beat Flipped Lysandra. Like,
Yep.
To this day,
Sometimes
played
I'm like, I
many
could go
games.
for the combo and attack him with a Watcher. That could not work. I'm just gonna play Flip Lysandra. I can't beat that either.
I literally played a game last night where I played Matron the Watcher, and then my opponent played like Passage Unearned or something, some really cheap spell that got rid of my Watcher. And I was sitting there and I was like, I could play another Watcher and go for the kill. But then it's going to be pretty rough. I might get like attacks back. And then I might die if like he vengeances it or something. Right. And so I was like, whatever. I'm just going to play Lysandra. And then I just made like,
How could you play Lysandra after playing a Matron?
I don't remember maybe it was like Pillar Lysandra, or maybe it was like I already had 3 of 4 and I just played, I had a Watcher coming out from like an Entomb. Something along the lines. Regardless, I remember the situation being I could go for the combo here. Screw that. I'll just do it later.
Yeah.
And then tried to do it later. It got vengeanced, and then still handily just ground out this mid-range game with just like Lysandra and some.
The amount of times where I have
wasn't
like
even
one
close.
card in hand, my opponent's at like 10, and they have no cards in hand, and they just like pass to me, and I just have Lysandra, and then like they just open scoop. Yeah, it happens so often. It's ridiculous. Yeah, the card is Lysandra is very, very good.
Lysandra is so good.
Still, I would love it if they could nerf that card and make it not make this dumb 8/8 when you played it.
That you mean
that
buff
would be
the
a
card?
huge buff. Yeah.
That Frozen Thrall is. I mean, there has to be an award for like the most useless sidekick.
Yeah.
It feels like Lysandra like brings her little brother to every event. It's like, can we please?
And he just takes up space.
Can you please stop bringing this Frozen Thrall to the party, Lysandra? Like nobody wants your little brother here.
And it's way worse when it's not coming on turn 11 because you don't want to play it on turn 3 because you don't want to expose it to removal because your plan is to flip it.
There's like one
So it
time,
never happens.
like one game I played against Ezdraven where my hand was 2 Lysandras, and I was like, it was turn 3, and I was like, this 8/8 might matter. It was like against Ezdraven, and it did only one time. That's the only time I won the.
Did it
I
block
won the
Captain
game.
Farron?
It did. It blocks Captain Farron,
Yep.
and then I won the game, and that's the only time that 8/8 has ever mattered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most of the Frozen Thrall's life, it spends getting replaced by Fading Memories Iced Pillars, or like Spectral Matrons.
So that's another thing. So the deck is very powerful, obviously. But if you think about it, Lysandra plus Thing plus the Trundle that made the Ice Pillar is 3 slots. And then Pillar, flip my Lysandra. You just can't Spectral Matron Watcher. So you have to find a way to kill your frickin' Trundle a lot of the time. That's the one that needs to die.
It's brutal.
And so I actually wouldn't be surprised if we see some glimpses and maybe some Spirit Journeys. That doesn't solve that particular problem, but it's really good against the Invoke matchups. And good players just tend to like playing the Invoke control decks. The lines are really hard, and they have a great late game. And you see them a lot. Whenever I pull up coverage, there's an Invoke control deck in there. And
People really
I
like big
expect
Targon piles.
Yeah, I expect a good amount of it at the seasonal, even though it's not like super on the radar. And so stuff like a text Spirit Journey, text Glimpse the Unthinkables could be really good.
Yeah, you never know when Ophelia. What do you guys think the Aphelios Tom Kench of this season will be? If you had to make a prediction, real quick, one random like Targon pile that you think might pop up and be
Zoe
really
Diana.
good. Zoe Diana. Interesting.
That's probably a good guess.
The thing I like about Zoe Diana over Zoe Aesol is that you don't have to play Eclipse Dragon and you don't have to play Aesol.
Honestly, that sounds great.
So you like don't have the clunky cards. So like your entire curve is like 4 mana 2/3s is the worst body, and then a bunch of like 2 mana 3/2s and shit.
Oh yeah,
you
you're
still
play
get like
them,
the
trade off,
concerted
and then
strikes. and
your entire
everything.
deck costs like 4 mana or less, and then at the very
Play the
end,
atrocities.
Oh, you play the atrocities.
yeah, exactly, and then you play like a couple star shapings and atrocity, and then like you just sort of make all of these giant things because you invoke them all.
I'm on it. I'm testing this deck when I get home.
It sounds pretty good, honestly. Deck sounds pretty good. All right. I think that's about all of the decks I have that I want to talk about for this season. Do you guys have anything you want to add in general? Any matchups, advice, particular you want to add before we move on to our questions for the week?
If you're gonna play TLC, like board space. Also pass a lot. Just the amount of times when I'm like, well, I'm only taking 3 from an open, pass. I could avalanche 3 creatures, only taking 4 from an open, 5 from an open, pass. Yep. And then they play another thing, and I'm like, nice, got him.
Yeah, pass is the best button in that. Pass is the best card in that deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's Fading Memories then. Pass.
There's not. I guess the best thing I can think of. We kind of already said it, but like, please God, invoke tricksters in the Zoe Lee when you're playing Zoe Lee. It's just gonna kill them.
It's really
people
good.
only have 20 life.
It hits for so much.
Yeah, it hits for a lot, and you have all these gems.
If you think we only have 20 life, you're playing the wrong decks, friend.
I mean, sure, but
people only have 30 life.
Yeah,
you got to get through it eventually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's just there's a lot of like decide. Okay, real advice: decide what you're playing way sooner than you think you need to, because what matters more than deciding your good lineup is knowing how to play your lineup.
Oh my God.
Please do not do the thing that Noble does every time.
Hey,
every time, always, in every tournament, where we all like, and we've all done this.
It's not just Noble.
Yeah, he just does it the most.
We're just making him a scapegoat, but
yeah. Everyone does this, where they like decide a thing, like they decide their lineup or they decide the deck they're playing, and then they play, like they practice for a while, and then it's the night before the tournament or the day of.
Day of is my personal favorite.
We've all done.
I'm a big fan of the mid-deck list registration day of Waffle.
Yeah.
Oh, I am the king of deciding what deck / cards I am playing on the hour drive to the event. I hop in the car for the 20 minutes to the event that starts in 40, and I'm like, okay, guys, what am I playing?
It happens a lot.
All the time.
I've been there.
Don't do that. Just stop doing that, because it like.
But what if there's a more optimal deck?
I promise that if you go into this tournament feeling good about how you've prepared this lineup,
having played 5 games of this lineup, it's way better to have played 5 games of your lineup against someone else than it is to have found the best deck.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just feel experienced on what you're about to play.
Yeah.
And you're gonna do better than if you played a better deck with no experience on the deck.
It's different. You have to make weird decisions. This tournament, the format is weird. It's different than ladder. I played all my decks on ladder for 100 games. Okay, that's good. But but you need to do more prep than that. You need to have thought about when your opponent has Sand Scouts, TF Fizz, discard aggro. You're like, fuck, what am I going to do?
Yeah. It's like, whoa.
Oh, Nightfall. That's what it was. It wasn't discard aggro. It was Nightfall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a brutal match.
I thought it was, oh God. Okay, continuing.
Regardless, it's really hard to know exactly how to play every deck without having just played the decks you're playing.
Yeah.
So it's important to play the decks you're playing. My last piece of advice for everyone here is to make sure that you go in and adjust your decks to make sure that you have your plan, right? Don't just take the decks that you're taking from ladder. Don't play your stock ladder TLC deck. Don't play your stock ladder Thresh Nasus deck. Don't play your stock ladder Lee Zoe deck. Change a couple cards because you know the general decks you're going to ban. If you sit there and think about it for 5 or 10 minutes, you'll be able to come up with a general matrix in your head of what your decks are generally good against, what they're generally bad against, and you can make a couple changes to try and cover some weaknesses of things that you won't be able to ban, or to really hammer your strengths because you know you won't need these cards that are kind of hedges for your bad matchups.
The best tournament prep I have ever done was for a Magic the Gathering Pro Tour, one that I qualified for. Flips hair. We had an Airbnb. We had a giant whiteboard on the wall, and we wrote down every deck in the format and what sideboard cards we wanted against every deck. And then we made our 15-card sideboard out of that, and then wrote out a sideboard guide. And whether or not we were right didn't really matter that much, because I had thought about every matchup and what I was going to do in that matchup, what my plan was, what cards I was putting in, what cards I was taking out. I adjusted it a bit on the day. After playing against a matchup twice, the mirror 4 or 5 times or whatever, I decided, oh, we were a little wrong about this. But I was confident in my decisions and I'd thought about it all before. And that's a Magic metaphor. So for this game, that's looking at your 3 decks and then looking at possible lineups that people could play. Thinking about just what you want to do in each matchup and just knowing matchup tables for your decks so you know what you need to ban.
Yeah, the other day, Noble came up to me in the kitchen and he was like, okay, we need to make sure that we don't do that thing where we end up not being confident on all of our decks. Like, I feel like I need to play more so that I know my decks. And I was like, honestly, I feel like if we just had like a 30-minute whiteboard meeting or like maybe an hour like whiteboard meeting before we started playing with the people who are playing your lineup or a similar lineup, where everybody just talked, like we just went through a quick like analysis of all of our decks general matchups and talked about the plan, like what cards we want to keep or mulligan, what our plan is, what we would ban in general. Like even just 30 minutes of advice, talking through it with your friends, you're going to get some general tips. You're going to hear their thoughts on the matchups, what they think they're about, what they think you should be keeping, what you shouldn't be. Once again, it doesn't really matter how right you are. What matters is you're thinking about it, because as soon as you're thinking about it, you're far more likely to make an educated decision instead of miss a random key detail and make a tournament costing blunder, basically. So.
I think that a very concise way to put the last 10 minutes is establish a baseline. To have a starting point for where all of these decisions are coming from, because you will adjust. These decisions will change. There was never, ever, ever a time where you make a plan and that plan pans out 100% across all the matchups that you plan for. It will not happen. But if you plan for these matchups, you will have a place to start. And that is so important.
Yeah, then you have a thesis to base your guesses on, right?
Exactly.
Like you aren't just going to be like, if I show up with Katarina Yasuo, right?
Oh, poor Nico.
Some amount of the time you're going to be like, oh God, what do I do? And some amount of the time you're going to look at this Katarina Yasuo deck and be like, looks kind of like I'm getting cheesed by discard. Like, the deck looks kind of like a Lulu Jarvan deck or the Shen Jarvan deck. Similar in construction. Now I have at least kind of an idea what my matchup table is going to be like, right? Like, you can draw information no matter how bizarre it is. Right? There's always a little bit of extra prep that you could have. So the more comfortable you are with your decks, the more likely you are to make right decisions, I think.
Yeah. Educated
quickly.
guesses are infinitely better than regular just guesses.
It's crazy how much a little information can
go a long way.
Yeah, like even just having the slightest of an inclination of which direction you should be leaning or why a matchup would be good or bad when you're looking at like bans, right? If you see a deck, have you ever played against Zoe Vi? I bet a lot of people the answer is no, right? Like I've never played against it. I've seen the deck, I've looked at it.
Well,
I don't really know what it would look
too.
like, right? That deck might be good. I have no idea what that deck's matchups are, right? Like if I looked at a deck list, I would have no idea, but I would try to like look at the cards in it and be like, is this similar to the Zoe Diana deck? Is this similar to like Ezreal Draven style stuff?
It's Weimar basically.
It's basically Weimar, exactly,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like if you can draw that conclusion, if you know what the Weimar matchup is for your deck, right, then you're going to have a much easier time analyzing that deck.
Yeah. And one last piece of advice: don't register Teemo. I don't know what it was. I'm trying to get the rest of the way to qualify for the TSL tournament. I played TLC against like Tom Rocca and TF and Teemo Sejuani, Teemo Ezreal kind of stuff. And they had a flipped Teemo and a flipped Ezreal, and I had 30 puff caps in my deck and 20 cards. And then on my turn, I drew 5 puff caps, and he played 5 spells, and I took 2 damage because I had to flip Cassandra. It's all of the puff caps and all of the Ezreal triggers. Just don't do it. Just don't do it.
Sounds about right.
Don't do it.
Also, buy a whiteboard.
Ooh, the whiteboards are nice.
This isn't a joke.
The whiteboards help.
I'm completely serious. I bought a whiteboard
Draw out that Excel sheet, baby.
Yeah, draw out that matrix in your head.
Yeah, I bought a whiteboard for like $20 at Costco like 6 years ago. The amount of mileage I've gotten out of that thing is
Whiteboards
unreal.
Yeah. doesn't even need to be like a big Costco sized Walmart. Like you can get them at Target for way cheaper than that, I'm sure.
Oh,
like
probably.
personal sized ones. But the big ones are way cooler.
You know
so.
those things you used in high school that were like you had to like write the answers to in math class and like, hold them up?
Yeah.
That works too, I guess.
That would work, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to our listener questions for this week. First off, our question is from Juxta. They ask, how much stock do you put in leaderboard trends when building your lineup?
We're talking about like what's going on like top 20 Masters.
Yeah, presumably.
There's something crucial about top 20 Masters players. They like to play weird shit sometimes. They like to try things out. They're pretty confident. They play a lot of the game. They can win with basically anything a lot of the time. So they might not always be on the most optimal thing. They're like often are trying things out. So not a ton. My default is to like, if I want to play a list and don't have a list, I don't go to Mobalytics. I just like scroll through the thing until I find the deck. I'm like, does this feel like fine? Yeah, cool. Let's go. Just kind of get a good feeling of the meta. But don't be a slave to it or anything. And also, it's going to be different than what your tournament decks are going to look like. So,
Yeah, something to note when you said that people at the top of the ladder like to play weird decks is a trap a lot of people fall into across all professional games, all games played as an esport. This happens everywhere. Someone will look at a pro player and be like, this pro player did this thing that was really weird. That must mean it's good. No, wrong. Stop that.
Bad.
That
Squirt, squirt.
that pro player did that because they wanted to maybe have fun, or let's say like that pro player is allowed to do that because they're way, way, way better at this game than you are.
They might have a reason, but it's probably not just blanket it's good. Maybe it's attacking something.
As it turns out, if they had a reason, it was probably a good reason, and you probably can't do it nearly as well as they can, because then you'd probably also be a pro player. But yeah, there is absolutely something to be said about like getting data from the leaderboard isn't bad. Just like do not
take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just do it to have fun too.
Yeah, it's not like
Everybody plays fun decks.
yeah. Get some inspiration if you want, but don't be a slave to it.
Yeah. I think that like leaderboard trends usually don't affect my lineup at all. Leaderboard trends very frequently affect the decks that I'm laddering with, but leaderboard trends usually aren't like leaderboard trends are usually not the thing I'm looking at the like week or two before a seasonal tournament when I'm trying to build a lineup, right? Like
Oh yeah.
when decks are making moves, like, you know, the seasonal tournaments almost always towards the end of a meta. There aren't really very big ladder movements going on around then. It's normally more of a like early season thing where the ladder movements are going to affect my lineup, but usually towards the end of season tournaments, like the seasonal tournament, for example, they basically are a non-factor, I think.
Yeah, they're basically what I yoink random deck lists off of when I'm tilted.
Yeah, they frequently affect my laddering, but not my tournament lineup, I don't think. Our next question is from Time. They ask, is an anti-Thresh Nasus lineup for the seasonal reasonable? I think if you can pull it off, yes, I think it is totally reasonable. I'm not sure if that deck will be a better target than TLC. Yeah. I suspect that Thresh Nasus will be the most played tournament deck. Yeah. So if you can give me 3 decks that are both good and target Thresh Nasus,
that part's really important. The deck has to be good too.
Yeah, the deck has to be good too. So I need 3 decks that are all good and beat Thresh Nasus, and I don't really know what those are, but I think if you have a lineup that you think fits that criteria, then that's a totally reasonable plan.
Like you just sit down in your matchup, you're like, cool, banning TLC, we're beating this Thresh Nasus deck. You beat the Thresh Nasus deck, and then they win one of their games because Thresh Nasus does that. It's pretty hard.
It's just
to win 2 games in a row against Thresh Nasus. It's like in general, like
it's just so consistent, and it has such nut draws.
Even if your decks are both 60-40, it's only going to happen 60% of the time that you're going to win. Well, not even. They're going to win both games. Like
yeah, exactly. Like it's well under.
So 40% of the time they're just going to like beat you, and then it's like, now what? You have to beat this other deck twice.
Yeah, that you didn't prepare for.
What if your decks are bad?
Yeah, it's like spoiler alert, like Teemo Ezreal and like, you know.
I don't think that deck's good against that deck either. So.
I don't know what decks are good, but I'm making up jank, you know.
Yeah.
Yasuo, Katarina, and Teemo Ezreal are not going to beat their third good deck, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not going to win against Deep.
It's like overwhelm stuff is like kind of good. Like 3 toughness creatures that don't have a Blighted Caretaker plus the keyword overwhelm like is reasonable. That's pretty good against them.
Yeah, I don't have any specific examples because I don't have numbers, and which, spoiler alert, probably gives you the inclination that I'm not really thinking about trying to build a tournament lineup to beat Thresh-Nasus, because like it popped into my head. I thought, how would I do that? And then thought to myself, that doesn't really seem doable. I'm gonna move on. Like, if I can't beat TLC is then how on earth am I gonna beat Thresh-Nasus? Thresh-Nasus is just so in the middle of everything.
TLC is just much easier to beat because like it has this one plan.
Yeah.
And so like,
and there's 2 damage sweepers and there's the Watcher. And if you can beat both of those things, you can be able to beat TLC. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
That's pretty much it. Turns out it's hard to do that.
and it's not, and it's also pretty hard to do. It's harder to do that against Thresh-Nasus because you need to beat Blighted Caretaker on turn 3, pulling your dudes and hitting you for 8.
Yeah, and Cursed Keeper, Ravenous Butcher turns, you need to beat that. Like,
yeah, tech that Nico recently adopted that I've really liked is Stalking Shadows. That has been very good. Like
in Thresh-Nasus?
Yeah, my opponent plays
that sounds great.
Like Stalking Shadows, Cursed Keepers, really good. It helps you find fodder or sack whatever you're missing. It just like ties the deck together well. And the only time he's ever whiffed on it, he still beat me. So,
All right. Our next question comes from Carinal. They ask, is there a reason to not play Thresh-Nasus? It doesn't seem particularly busted, but it doesn't seem to have anything that targets it super well, meaning that it is perfect for lineups. Essentially, what are the positives and negatives choosing a safe deck that's difficult to target versus picking a deck meant to prey on an expected meta? So let's start with, is there a reason not to play Thresh-Nasus?
the reason that you could convince me of is that you have a plan and Thresh-Nasus doesn't fit into that plan. If you're trying to bring good decks, then I think you should play Thresh-Nasus. Unless there are two reasons. There's that one I just mentioned where you're like, hey, I'm going to play these good aggro decks. I'm going to play TS Fizz, discard aggro, Nightfall, or I'm going to play, throw Sand Scouts in there, whatever. That's cool. Great. You can do that. You can play Scouts if you want. You can play MF Quinn and you can play Lucian Azir. Like you can play like Demacia aggro decks, you can like add in Shen Jarvan or whatever. And like you think that's
as long
good.
as you have a plan.
Yeah.
That's all right.
But I think that a lot of the time you should be putting Thresh-Nasus in your lineup. It puts a lot of pressure on. So if you have a good plan, you don't need to do it. And if you don't know how to play it.
Yep. I agree.
We are
very much agree.
Yeah, this is coming out on Friday, so hopefully you're getting some, or maybe Thursday. We might even try to upload early this week. We'll see. We're recording late, so we have more information, and we'll try to get this information to you as fast as possible. But at the time I'm recording this, if I hadn't played any games of Thresh-Nasus, I'd be like, damn. But
might not be able to. Probably can't play it.
But I can. Yeah. But I could put 15 hours into it.
Yeah, you could put 15 hours into it. If you can't,
then you shouldn't play it.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. You probably want. I mean, I would recommend like at least 8 or 10 hours on like every deck you want to play in the seasonal. I think is probably like about the amount that you should have on these decks, right? Because like that's about how much you need to be comfortable in all of these matchups and all the situations. I think maybe that's a little too much. Maybe you really only need like 5 hours or so on each deck to be comfortable. But I don't think you'll just be familiar with every situation by then. So
yeah, no, just play Thresh-Nasus probably is where I'm leaning.
That's yeah.
Just do it.
Just kind of just play it. It feels like it's like, yeah, it feels like most of the plans are going to involve Thresh-Nasus. So if you have one that doesn't, then totally that's fine. But most of the ones that are in my head involve playing it. So probably going to play it. All right. CES Ibiquazi. Oh boy, I'm sure I butchered that. Sorry. Asks, do you think Kindred as a card is fine, or would you make changes? If so, what would they be?
That's way too good.
Kindred is way too good.
Yeah,
Can we make Kindred like a 5/5? That's not really the change Kindred needs, but like
it would help.
Kindred being a 4-mana 3/3 might help.
To be honest, I think the answer to this question is that yes, Kindred is fine. She's not that good, but she doesn't have to be that good. It feels like this card would be like pretty awful to play against if she was too good.
Under the land. It's
or if they were too good. Sorry. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna land on the Kindred is fine side of this argument.
Kindred's great. Well, not great. But Kindred is good.
Kindred is fine.
Yeah.
That's also her power level. Their power level. Crap.
Yeah,
fine. Yeah.
Like
totally medium.
I really like the card design.
I could see a Bilgewater Shadow
Thresh
control
wasn't
deck.
so busted, I could see an argument for playing him because actually the deck is kind of gravitated towards that playstyle of being a little more grindy, trying to play more removal spells. Just turns out Kindred in particular doesn't
doesn't really do that very well. And also, Thresh is just insane.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll see some more Kindred stuff in like a Shadow Isles, maybe PNZ control deck if PNZ gets a little bit more relevant removal that can like keep up with the field that's what's going on right now. Yeah. Or like when damage-based removal gets a little bit better again, but it's not very good right now, so.
Yeah, it turns out that the good thing to be doing with Kindred is probably removing your opponent's things and doubling up on that, because it's just hard. Like, you can't play Kindred Blighted Caretaker in the same turn. You can't play Kindred Spirit Leech in the same turn until very late.
Yeah, and otherwise, if you're not killing their things, you're just killing their worst creature every turn, and that's really not that good. Like,
yeah, it's good when you're Withering Wail all of their 1 toughness creatures and marking their Nasus, but like...
But yeah, if you're just like
Black Spear and you're like,
if you're just glimpsing your own thing and then like, okay, kill your Everosan Sentry, it's like, oh sure, whatever, like who cares, you know?
Especially when that thing that got marked is dying to your attack in combat that would have happened anyway.
Yeah, that
happens
honestly,
a lot.
That honestly is actually maybe the only thing I would change is that like if you could somehow word Kindred to mark something after combat or whatever, so that you can't just line up blocks and then end up having the thing get marked and blocked anyway.
Targets with my mark cannot block this round. They could
sure,
that
whatever
could
it
do
is.
it.
Yeah, I don't
just
know.
like it just feels so bad when you're like, haha, I marked your thing. They're like, that's
Block.
okay. I was gonna chump with this 1/1 Spiderling anyway.
Yeah, whatever. All right.
I'm having this
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
piece of advice. I'm having this discussion with Time in our Discord right now. This man is trying to cut Glimpse Beyond from his Thresh Nasus deck. Don't do that.
Don't do. I've
Don't
had
do
this.
that.
I've said
Don't do
this
that.
before,
Don't do
guys.
it. Don't do
Glimpse Beyond is the best card in your deck in like every deck it's in.
Yeah,
I've had this take
I'm putting
for like
more of that card in TLC.
I've had
That's
this
what
take
I'm
for
doing.
the last like 8 months. It hasn't changed. Glimpse Beyond is like one of the best cards in the game, and you can't convince me otherwise. I don't think.
Yeah, card's awesome.
Just play it in your deck.
It's so funny because that card is in Magic as Altar's Reap and not very good, and then Atrocity is in Magic as for 2 mana.
It's fling.
And both of those are like 2 of the best cards in the game, and in Magic they're just like unplayable.
Yeah.
It's just kind of interesting.
All right. Our next question comes from Dragon. They ask, this is a fun one. Everyone wants to try and brew the best possible lineup of meta decks for the seasonal. However, I want to know, what do you think the worst lineup you could bring from the current meta decks?
Okay.
Go,
So-
yeah, fire it off, Q.
So-
should we come up with one whole answer together? Because I think there's a lot to talk about here. I feel like we should present it.
I already have an answer. Just-
Okay, well then we'll just go.
Yeah. So it's going to involve spiders.
Okay.
First off, right off the bat, it's going to involve spiders because spiders. Just please God don't play spiders. It loses to everything that's good right now, and the things that it's good against, it sometimes just loses to them too. And the other 2 decks I would bring to this worst lineup of all time is both scout decks.
Oh,
Because I'm not saying these scout decks are bad. However, I would never, ever advise doing this because you're bringing 2 of the same deck, right? So if anyone's lineup has a good scouts matchup, you lose because you're bringing 2 of them. So you have to play one of them at least. But if they have a good matchup, you're probably playing both of them.
yeah, that's pretty unfortunate.
Here's mine. You ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Lee Zoe, Deep, and Spiders.
That was literally the exact.
You
three I
just
was
like
about to
can't
snap
beat
on.
anything. Like your opponent can look at your lineup
exactly,
and they're just like,
they just get to pick.
What is my
whichever-
lineup good at? I'll beat it
Exactly.
twice.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, every
so you
time.
just or you bring like you basically just get to let your opponent select which section of the meta they're best against.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
you just-
actually a good, yeah.
You just bring like
because the lineup you presented isn't actual like. I could see a series of matchups that they would win, right? Because if you're just
at
like
least
pretty
you're playing
soft
3
aggro.
aggro decks, right?
Yeah.
Like you got to play in there. But like
That's true.
if you just bring all of these decks, they're all like kind of the not the best version of their archetype. You know, you got like medium aggro. Maybe let's bring Teemo Burn instead of Spiders. Let's make it even worse.
No, that deck is. I actually think that deck, since it's not as board centric, I think it's going to win games that Spiders wouldn't.
All right, sure. So we'll bring Spiders and then like
I have strong convictions about what the worst thing to do is.
not the best. You know,
and I
we'll bring
plan
not
to
the
do
best
slightly
aggro
better than
deck.
that.
Not the best combo deck. We'll bring Lee Zoe instead of TLC.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, if you can beat Lee Zoe, you could definitely beat Lee Zoe. And then we'll just show up with Deep.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, let's cross. I mean, this lineup's like decent against TLC, I guess, but like,
Well, no, it's not because we have to play spiders against it.
yeah, that's fair.
we have the auto loss against TLC.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
I mean, I guess we have Deep and Lee Zoe that are both respectable matchups, but like,
Yeah.
which I guess are actually two of their better matchups. But
yeah, and I want to
you're gonna get smoked by
be
Thresh
clear.
Nasus though.
I didn't put Thresh Nasus or Ash LeBlanc, stuff like that in this lineup because the deck is like generically pretty good, which I think makes it a good deck to be putting in your lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereas these decks have some really bad matchups.
Yeah.
All right. Our next question and our last question for this episode is from Twilight. They ask, "What is your pre-tournament routine?"
I love this question.
Do you have one?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay,
It's not like
curious.
I'm not like I don't have a pre-tournament routine to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna walk off the right side of the
2
bed.
eggs, sunny side up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna walk
Brush
out
my
of the
teeth
door.
after I get out of the shower.
Yeah, it's nothing super picky like that or like really intense. It's just there's a trend of I always need to get up a little bit.
Some bird squawking.
Yeah,
in the
there's
background.
a bird was just very loud for a second. Sorry.
Hopefully they didn't hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, I always need to wake up a little bit earlier than normal. Whether it's because I want to be a little more prepared or just it's usually because of anxiety. I usually can't help waking up earlier than I normally do even if I wanted to not. But
Get the nerves.
yeah, exactly. I wake up a little earlier. I always order breakfast from a place that like I really like. And I don't care how much it costs because I need to like eat something good, relatively
It's
healthy.
important to get your sleep. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
and I
good
just
line.
need to like
I like
feel
it.
good going into the
We should
tournament.
do that this weekend.
And I need to get a good cup of coffee. I don't want to like I can make it like I have a pretty good coffee maker at home and I buy pretty good coffee, but I usually want to buy my coffee from somewhere nice, you know?
This is a Magic tournament
is the
experience
treat
because
yourself.
like when you're driving, you can like go to a place out to eat and then get some good coffee.
Yeah, exactly. And I just need to
It's
like
a little weirder when you're ordering it all to your house in the middle of a pandemic, but
it's true. But
Still
like
good.
I need to have good food, a good drink, and I need to make a situation where I feel comfortable just being in for several hours.
That's a pretty good way to do it. Yeah, go ahead.
wake up in the morning feeling like P. Diddy,
Oh my god.
grab glasses, get out the door, hit the city, brush your teeth before you leave with a bottle of Jack. Because when you leave for the day, you're not coming back. You got to get pedicure on your toes. I can't stress this enough. Toes. You got to try on all your clothes. And crucially, boys blowing up your phones.
So I think that
Crucially, don't stop. Make it pop. Blow those speakers up.
very important. Okay. I don't really have one. I don't really
Neither does Noble.
All right.
apparently.
I have an actual answer to this question.
Yeah. Okay.
Jesus Christ.
I don't really have one. I don't, or if I do, I've never really made an effort to notice it. I guess I make sure that I have a cup of coffee, but that's every morning. So I'm just a caffeine addict. So that's kind of every morning. I don't really know. I usually really like tournaments. I like waking up for them. I like going to them. I like playing in them. But I don't really think like there's anything specific that I do.
So, okay, for me, there's a crucial element here, and let's see if you can figure out what it was. So, stay up too late the night before, playing matchups, stress. Go to bed, sleep restlessly because you're worried about oversleeping, and also what decks you're playing or deck you're playing.
Very
Stress.
important.
Wake up in the morning, do a little bit of stressing, hang out with your friends, try to choke down some food, coffee. My stomach is really weird in the morning, especially when I don't get a lot of sleep, so it's kind of rough. Drink some coffee, which usually helps, but makes me even more jittery and hyper than I already am. Stress a little bit. Sit down, figure out, register my decks, lock them in. Stress a lot before that, and waffle a lot before that. And then just kind of get in the good mental space to play. This is what I actually do. Ideally, what I would do is like wake up, eat a good breakfast, like sit down on my computer.
Practically, you just
Yeah,
are a
like,
stress
I
ball
don't
for
know.
9 hours before, and then
Yeah, like, I don't know, like beat
and
up
then
a
sit down
CPU
for
in
round
Melee
one.
as a heat check. Yeah. And then like, yeah.
Oh, that's my favorite. This is okay. This is going to be a slight sidetrack, but my favorite pre-tournament ritual I've ever heard was a friend told me that his pre-tournament ritual was he'd sit down before a tournament, and he'd grab his deck, and he would draw. He wouldn't shuffle it, or he'd take it. He'd like cut it one time, and he'd draw one hand with his deck, and he'd call it the heat check.
Yeah,
and
heat check.
If he drew like an absolute monster hand, he'd be like, I'm playing today. We are on. It's time to win this tournament. Focus up. He draws 7 hand. He's like, man, this hand is awful. He just like picks it up, puts the deck away, and would just like leave the tournament.
Who was
He
this?
just wouldn't play. This was I don't remember who. A friend told me the story.
Yeah.
But I remember hearing the story where he would just actually like show up to tournaments, pull out his deck, do the heat check, and then like pack it up and go home if it wasn't his day.
Please tell me he didn't do this for like GPs.
No, I don't think it was like a GP or anything, but I think it did happen at like side events at Grand Prix or whatever, where he'd be like, should I play this event? Like draw 7. I'll play the next one. You know,
okay.
maybe the next draft will be
For me,
my
like
thing.
shower, get up a little before, coffee, food.
Switch at least
Shadow
one deck
King.
in your lineup.
Oh,
You decided on the
every
light
time.
before.
Switch at least, and then switch back. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that brings us to a close. So good luck, everybody, in your seasonal tournament if you are playing this weekend. I'm really excited to see what does well.
Yeah, I'm excited to play. I think I'm locked. I'm debating. I am locked. I'm debating playing again. If I lose, I might not be locked, and if I win, I then would play again. And then if I won that, then I would be in a much better tiebreaker spot. So I'm like kind of deciding exactly what I'm going to do. But the answer is probably not do anything, even though it feels like kind of a cop out because like playing for the bye now, we did the math earlier, and
Being higher on the ladder.
being high on the ladder is basically a buy because you can have an extra loss to give during the tournament, which is really important. Which is very worth it as someone who's played a lot of Magic tournaments with buys. It's excellent.
It's so nice to have them. Yeah. But it's hard to get to. So
So I don't know if I want to value because I could lose 3 in a row and then I could not make it, and that's a real disaster. So you kind of have to. I'm kind of having to weigh that.
you absolutely have to figure it out. So I think that unless there's anything else anybody wants to say, I want to thank you for listening to this week of episode of Champ Select. Good luck to everyone in the seasonal if you are participating in it. If you're not a member of our Discord already, make sure to join. The link is in the description of whatever platform you are listening to this on. And without further ado, we'll see you all on the next episode of Champ Select.